Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode. I am Danielle, and today I'm going to be sharing my 3 tips for setting boundaries. So, a lot of times when we hear people talk about what they've achieved or how they achieved so much in their life, they kind of leave out a few things. So we don't know how they achieved it. We don't know how they had time to do X, Y, and Z. We don't fully realize the amount of mental work that goes into that and achieving all of these goals. Yes, we know that stress and the stress of finishing tasks, staying consistent, et cetera, all of that goes into it. But it's so much more to it than just knowing like the mental stress that goes into creating and accomplishing goals in life. I made a TikTok a while back about how I became stricter with my time, and the results of which was I ended up having more time to do what I wanted to do for my personal life, and that I needed much less time to get things done in my work life done. So this was really just a boundary that I made for myself. Being stricter with my time was a boundary I created. Boundaries are just rules that we give ourselves to help us have the life that we're trying to create. Let's think about rules for a second, okay? Every facility has them, and for a reason. And the reason is always point blank safety. Safety of the consumer, the products, the facility, etc. If you're a mom, you have rules for your kids because of safety. If you're a bank, you have rules because of safety. You don't want to get robbed. You want to keep your clients' money safe, etc. So what's the difference between creating rules for yourself for how you achieve goals, how you allow yourself to be treated, so on and so forth? There really is no difference other than the fact that we're not taught to create autonomy over our lives. And so we're going to change that a little bit. If you're listening to today's episode, you're most likely self-employed in some capacity. And if you made it this far, it's probably because you want to be better at making boundaries for yourself. So let's just hop right into it, okay? My top 3 tips when creating boundaries are: 1, when you create a goal for yourself, create at least one rule that goes along with it. So, for example, my goal this month is to lower my screen time on my phone. So the rule that I am applying to this goal is that my phone will not be welcome in my office unless I'm intentionally creating content. This rule is because I'm in my office quite a bit. I like to be on my computer for fun and for work, but my phone does not need to be in my office when I'm on my computer. I get notifications on my computer. I can call people from my computer. I can FaceTime. I can search things on the internet. I can go on social media. My phone doesn't need to be in my office when I'm in my office. But it needs to be in my office when I create content. And I'm intentionally making content in my office because it's my office. I want to showcase my office while talking about business. Because I make content on my phone, my office has to be the exception to the rule. But once I'm done creating content, my phone needs to go back to a designated place. You can hang a basket outside of your office door. You can put it on your dresser, in the kitchen, wherever is easiest for you to implement the rule as well as allow the exception. For me, I just throw it on my bed because my bedroom's right across the hall. The next tip that I have to share is, when creating a boundary about or around time, make sure that you have systems set up to help you avoid interruptions. Especially as somebody that has ADHD, I really, really, really need to be strict about allowing interruptions into my life. So, for example, my door to my office may be shut, and my husband and son may know that I'm working. But unless that door is locked, what's really stopping a 3-year-old from opening up the door? Or my husband from checking in to see if I need anything or if he can get me water or whatever it might be. For more tips on how to avoid interruptions, I'll link up a video on YouTube. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can click one of those areas. But it's just going to be a TikTok video where I share some quick tips on how to avoid interruptions. And if you're listening on the podcast, So iTunes or Spotify, I will definitely leave the link in my show notes. But another example of being strict with your time is if your goal is to work for at least an hour or for only an hour. If you have ADHD, you know you're likely and there's a very high possibility that you can get caught up in hyper focus at any time and lose track of time, or that your time awareness might be off and the last 15 minutes felt like the longest year of your life. Make sure that you're setting timers for yourself. And I don't mean timers on your phone. I mean individual, buy a separate timer, one that really works for you, one that allows you to quickly create a timer without distractions, and set the timer without distractions. And it'll be, let's just say, I'll say you're welcome right now. Like, it's the game changer you need when it comes to timers. And my final tip is, well, not my final tip, but my final top 3 tips is, if you're new to creating boundaries or not good at figuring out what boundaries you actually need in your life, start tracking when somebody, whether it's a friend, a client, a customer, a family member, etc., does something to you that makes you feel uncomfortable, makes you feel hurt, or makes you feel like you already regret that interaction. And by regret that interaction, I mean, we think, yeah, I still think about conversations I had way back when, and I talk things out in my head. But the regret of the interaction that ends up with, oh, I should have said this, or, oh, I should have done that. I shouldn't have allowed myself to insert blank. Those are the regrets that I'm referring to, because most likely there is a boundary you should have or could have or wanted to set while having that interaction with somebody. So for instance, I can go back to the door one, because it's just that's how I found out how to create that boundary, or that I needed it. Unless my door was locked, my husband, who I absolutely adore and love, would just walk in. And not because he didn't respect my time, but because he didn't hear me talking to somebody. So he didn't think that I was on a call, or he didn't, he needed to tell me something very important about our son, or if he was cooking dinner or dinner was ready, he would just open the door and walk in. Well, there are times where I really don't want to be interrupted with any of those things, unless it's an actual emergency. Which in that case, he would scream through the door. But I realized I needed to lock the door in order to avoid those unnecessary, quote unquote, interactions that would actually interrupt my workflow. So that was something that I tracked, that I realized it made me feel, to an extent, disrespected, even though he was always checking in on me or bringing me something. But when you feel when you feel any form of disrespect, there's usually a boundary that your subconscious is telling you you need to implement it, because it's not okay to allow yourself to be treated in a way that you wouldn't allow yourself to treat yourself, or other people to treat yourself. There's actually this TikTok that I'm completely obsessed with. It's a quote that says, when somebody's disrespecting you or treating you poorly, to, instead of defend yourself, to ask them, do you think that I allow everybody to treat me this way? Or do you think that you deserve to be the exception to the rule? And I just think that that is so powerful. If somebody is disrespecting you or treating you poorly, and our initial instinct based off of people pleasing, etc., is that we want to defend ourselves in a positive way, and we want to try and explain things, or sometimes our anger really gets the best of us, and we want to just defend ourselves that way because they're pissing us off. Well, that statement right there is just pure gold, because it stops them in their tracks. It's a boundary that you place, so you don't have to justify anything. You just ask them the question, and it stops them in their tracks, because if they say, no, I want to be I deserve to be the exception to the rule. Well, then you know that there's no way of healing that. And the boundary would be some distance. Or the next boundary would be distance. But then the other concept is like, if they don't even realize, sometimes people don't realize that they're breaking a boundary or hurting your feelings or being disrespectful. And they want to change that. Like, for instance, back to the door, my husband never thought that he would have never thought that he was being disrespectful in a sense or whatever, because he was bringing me water, he was bringing me food, or like starting the conversation about something that happened that I should know about. And of course, all of those things, none of those things are inherently rude or disrespectful. So why would he think that I would feel disrespected? So we came up with the boundary together. I asked him flat out, what can I do to make it so that you don't interrupt me, even when you think that I'm not as busy as I am? And he was like, oh, you know what? I didn't even realize I did that. Could you just lock the door so I know I can turn the handle and I know like how to respect you even more? And I was like, yep, totally. And that's how we came up with that rule. The other way is that I don't lock my son out if we're home together and my husband's gone. I only lock the door when my husband is home, so that safety is a priority. But anyways, for more on boundaries, please check out episode 204 when Marissa and I talked all about boundaries and people pleasing. I think that you will be pleasantly surprised with some extra information and some girl talk about boundaries and setting them and people pleasing and how we stop it. So go check it out. And in the meantime, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the podcast. And if you've made it this far, please, please, please leave a like, a comment, and make sure to subscribe on YouTube and Spotify and iTunes. And also go ahead and leave a review over on Spotify and iTunes, because this podcast is going places and it needs your help. So I appreciate you all. Thank you again for listening. Until next time, I'll see you on TikTok. Bye, guys.